I now recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Posey.
Thank you very much, Chairman Raskin and Ranking Member Woodall, for this opportunity to testify you and my colleagues. I have two amendments, and they're directly related. One to strip funding from the Office of Children's Issues, and the other to block funding from the Lebanese Internal Security Force, which I'll hereafter refer to as the ISF, and I have combined those into one statement with your permission, just to save you time and me time.
Thank you very much.
I'm hoping that by offering these amendments, we can have a much-needed discussion about international child abduction and how we can make this a higher priority for the Department of State. I'm dealing with constituent cases that involve American children who have been abducted to Lebanon. As you can imagine, this is a very emotional topic, and I've not taken this subject lightly, and I know that you won't either. As of last year, 98 nations signed on to the Hague Convention on International Child Abduction. But there are still several countries, like Lebanon, that have not signed into the Hague Convention, making the return of abducted children and the resolution of their cases very difficult. The State Department's Office of Children's Issues is tasked with, among other things, like international child adoption services, overseeing cases of international child abduction. As per their annual 2019 report on child abduction, going back to 2016, only 33% of the children involved in abduction cases opened by the Office of Children's Issues have returned to the United States in the last 3 years. That's a very, very dismal proportion. A constituent of mine, Michelle Littleton, recently testified before a House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee about the abduction of her 3 beautiful children to Lebanon by her former husband a little over 2 years ago. Ms. Littleton has worked tirelessly to litigate the return of her children in Lebanese court, and remarkably has won landmark decisions, unprecedented decisions in the favor of an American in this type of case in Lebanon. Despite her legal victories, she still waits for the court orders to be enforced by the Lebanese Internal Security Force that I mentioned earlier. To make matters worse, the ISF dragged its feet while enforcing court-ordered return of her children and created a fugitive situation, allowing the abductor time to escape with her children. In the weeks leading up to Ms. Littleton's final court ruling, State Department officials informed me on numerous occasions they had an idea of the location of Mrs. Littleton's children so they could be returned quickly when all the appeals were exhausted. I come to find out later that they had in fact lost track of the children the previous months, but neglected to tell me, or Mrs. Littleton, and others involved in this case. In working the case, I further am disappointed that it took almost 2 years for me to get a scheduled phone call with our U.S. ambassador to Lebanon, Elizabeth Richard. I've also had a request for 7 months to speak with the Secretary about these cases. I hear other members are running into similar obstacles working similar constituent cases across this country. But something I found out to be the most insulting was when Ms. Littleton testified before the House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee about the international child reduction. Despite being invited, the Office of Children's Issues failed to even show up. Didn't even show up for the hearing. Then there's Dexter's case. The 4-year-old whose abductor kidnapped him committed fraud by obtaining false travel documents and took him to unsafe southern Lebanon. His abductor is wanted by the local authorities in Florida, the FBI, and Interpol. He has a record of making threats, past kidnappings, burglary, and has been held in contempt of court. Yet the State Department officials recently met with both him and Dexter in a local mall and did absolutely nothing to alert the authorities so that he could be returned. They did nothing. It's unbelievable, and we're really going to have a State Department that wants to leave the kids there in very poor conditions. Regardless of the renewed national emergency declaration, American taxpayers continue to foot the bill in Lebanon. Since 2006, the U.S. has provided Lebanon over $1.7 billion in security assistance, more than $2 billion in bilateral foreign assistance to Lebanon, and nearly $1.8 billion in humanitarian assistance since the start of the Syrian crisis. In many ways, our mission to Lebanon has failed. Despite spending billions of taxpayer dollars, our embassy doesn't feel comfortable asking the ISF which is more which is more like their local police department actually, to partner with us to recover American children and holds dangerous international child abductors and criminals accountable. If we leave these American children behind, we will be denying them the basic freedom and opportunities that each and every one of us in this room has enjoyed to graduate from high school, go to college, pursue a meaningful career. It's sad, but the possibility of cutting their funding may be the only way they will listen to us. I'm asking you to allow members of the House a chance to discuss this international child abduction issue, how we can direct taxpayer dollars to better serve American parents and citizens, and make the return of the abducted children a higher priority. Thank you very much.